Hey, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Ferrario Faceoff. I'm Mike Claiborne, and of course, our guest and host of this show is Alex Ferrario of ESPN 101 and also with the Blues broadcast team. Alex, it's good to talk to you, man. It's been a while.
Claims it has been a while. This All-Star break and Olympic break, what it was supposed to be, it's nice to have a breather, but on the other side, it's not nice to go this long without talking hockey. So I'm glad we're back at it.
That's true. And we have a lot of hockey to talk about. Blues have had a really extended time off. And, with that time off, what do you see as the state of this current situation with the Blues? Because, they ended on a sour note. That game against Winnipeg did not go well.
Yeah.
So what do you see as far as its future is concerned? Because they've had a lot of time to think about it. Hopefully they've had enough practice time to get some things straightened out. So from where you sit, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I think it was a successful first half, despite the struggles in November, despite Binnington struggling and them losing, what was it, 2 of their last 4 games before the regular season or the first half ended. I mean, you think about what they went through, Claves, with pretty much every single player going on the COVID list at some point, having guys in and out of the lineup, having to play multiple games with an extra skater on the defensive side or being down a skater overall. I thought it was a successful first half. Now, if you're going to nitpick, I think the biggest thing in the second half for the team is going to be consistency, because what we have seen is streaks where this team looks like they're clicking on all cylinders. And then we've seen streaks where they're turning the puck over at the neutral zone. Puck management seems to be a big time struggle for them. So if they can just tighten things up in their own zone in terms of puck exits, moving through the neutral zone, and consistent offensive zone time, I don't see how this team is any less than what the Colorado Avalanche are. I know Colorado's run away with it, but I think in terms of the depth of scoring for the Blues, they are on par with what Colorado has in terms of the top 12 forwards.
That's a good point you make, because I know when we think about Colorado, we think about the name guys. But I've always wondered, how deep were they going to be? They had to make some cap decisions about some players. They've got a lot of young guys on the third and fourth lines, and their defense, which I think is really good, still has some question marks as far as their depth is concerned also. And that's where I think the Blues kind of narrow that gap. Now, the one question I think everybody's going to ask you about is, how good are they going to be in goal? I mean, Binnington has not played well. I mean, you can say whatever you want to say. He hasn't played well enough to be a Stanley Cup champion, and that's what you're looking for from him. Husso's giving you what you've hoped for. So how do you start things off with the rest of the season? Is it Husso's job, or are you going to give Binnington another shot? I mean, where do we go with this?
Claves, this is the most fascinating portion of this second half, in my opinion. And this is what brings Craig Berube into the conversation of being a Jack Adams candidate in terms of head coach for his decision-making here. My gut would say to go back to Jordan Binnington, because 1, he's the guy that you paid to be the number 1 goaltender. 2, he's the guy that won you a Stanley Cup. And 3, you know that he's better than what he has been. At least you hope. That's where the concern sets in here. I mean, if it were me, Claves, the month of February is very forgiving to the Blues. I think they play a game and then they got a day off, play a game, got a few days off. There's no back-to-backs. They have time in between. I think I would go a 50-50 split if I'm Craig Berube in the month of February, to really see if Binnington can get his confidence back, because to me, that's been the biggest thing with him, Claves. The team has just not played well in front of him. Now, he has been giving up goals. Like, I'll go back to the Toronto Maple Leafs game where he gave up that goal late in the third to Mikheyev, where it was just a simple shot from the faceoff circle and it went right underneath his pads. That's the goals that you need to stop if you're a goaltender when the team's riding a high momentum-wise. But he just hasn't had that for you. And Ville Husso has. Statistically, Husso has been one of the best goaltenders in the National Hockey League. And we were talking on our show with Matt Larkin of the Hockey News, Claves, and he brought up something really interesting to me. He said that Ville Husso is doing exactly what Jordan Binnington did in that 2018-2019 season. And if you're Craig Berube, you see that. You've went through it with Jordan Binnington and Jake Allen. Do you do that again and feel that this goaltender can steal you hockey games?
I could not agree more. And, it's kind of like the 500-pound gorilla in the room where nobody wants to bring that up.
Right.
But let's face it, that's how Binnington got the job. And to be honest with you, he hasn't played that well since. And, there's different reasons. I mean, the bubble, there were a couple of injuries. It was a different situation. But I always remind people that Binnington was the fourth goalie in the organization for a reason.
Yes.
And my question is, are we seeing the Jordan Binnington that made him the fourth best goalie? Or do we think he can be the player that we saw for 3 months, 4 months in the playoffs, including the playoffs? So I think we're kind of at a crossroads with that. Tell you what, let's take our first break. We'll come back. We'll pick up this on some more because I think goaltending is certainly the key, along with a couple other items, and we'll talk about it with Alex Ferrario after this.
The future of electric vehicles is beginning to grow across the Midwest, but there's a lot of work to be done before most people will feel comfortable switching from gas to EV. Ameren, Illinois President and Chairman Richard Mark gives us some insight into how they're preparing by adding more electric vehicle charging stations.
Our vision is to basically have charging stations every 60 miles or so, from Cook County all the way to the tip of the state down to the Kentucky area, and then across the state, east and west, going toward Kansas and Iowa to the west, and going toward Indiana to the east. And so we feel that within the next few years we'll probably add, we're hoping to add 60 to 70 a year over the next 5 years to really complete that infrastructure for the entire Midwest. In fact, the Midwest now has all the utilities in the Midwest are joining together to coordinate that. So, which is the first time it's ever happened that you've had Wisconsin say, okay, we're going to build our charging stations here, and Illinois say, okay, well, we can tap on here, and Missouri, this makes sense for us. So we can expand that north, south, east, and west by coordinating with the other utilities.
Welcome back. We continue with the Ferrario Faceoff. Alex Ferrario with us, and we were talking about goaltending going into the break. What do you see in Binnington on why he's struggling? And you made a good observation. He's good for giving up one bad goal a night, and you can't win a championship with that kind of approach. So what are you seeing? Is there anything that stands out with you mechanically? Is it body language? And you brought up something else. With Jake Allen, when Craig Berube decided to make the move, Jake Allen took it like a pro and stayed ready. There were a couple of games he bailed him out down the stretch. Is Binnington's psyche one of which, where if they go away from him, do they lose him? Now, he may say, well, I'm not going anywhere because I've got a new contract.
Right.
But from a psyche standpoint, can he handle something like that, I guess, is the question.
Well, let's start there, Claves, because that's what I'm curious about. I mean, Binnington lived it. Jake Allen was the ultimate pro, not just the year that Binnington won the cup, but the year after as well, where Jake Allen came, he had the contract, and Binnington was still the number one guy. I think Binnington can be that. I mean, just being in the locker rooms around him this first couple of years in the NHL, I mean, he does seem to be a team guy. Now, you can say that, but what changes when you're put into a dilemma where you're not the guy anymore? But you're right. I mean, he's got the money. He knows he's going to be the guy. Ville Husso's an unrestricted free agent at the end of the season. So the writing on the wall is, yeah, you might not be playing this year, but you find a way to get your confidence back, and hopefully he can. The part for me that sticks out about Binnington, and Claves, you've watched goaltenders longer than me, but just watching him compared to what he was in that first year when they went on the cup run, he's way too aggressive, which is strange to say, but, like Ville Husso's, the toe of his skate blades are at the top of the blue crease on the net. Binnington's back of his skate blades are at the top of the crease in the net. And to me, that feels like maybe you're overcompensating a little bit. He's been beaten on his glove side an awful lot. Like that Toronto game, that's where they were picking him apart, which, I mean, that was what happened in the bubble against the Vancouver Canucks. It's what happened last year in the shortened season. But the other thing with Binnington was he always seemed to be in the right place at the right time when he won the cup. And this year, it always feels like he's trying to get to the right place at the right time, which maybe is a mechanics thing, maybe it's a confidence thing, but those are just a couple of things that stick out to me. It just at times feels like he's floundering in net, whereas if you watch Ville Husso, he does as little movement as possible, and he is standing right in the way of the puck when it comes to him.
It's kind of the way there was a goalie many years ago, Gump Worsley, was kind of like that, acrobatic, kind of looked like a house of fire in a lot of cases, but he always came up with the save. In Binnington's case, he does look like he's slightly disheveled, where he's like a half second late to getting where he wants to be. Husso lets the game come to him. And that was the biggest difference for me when Binnington first came on the scene. I thought his mechanics was solid. He was upright. He wasn't bent at the waist too much. He wasn't giving up the top parts of the net, and he was going side to side extremely well. The glove hand was out compared to in like it is now.
Yeah.
And they're beating him right here. They're beating him right here. And because he's, I just think that his mechanics are a little flawed. And I'm sure there's some video that he can see that sees where he was. And I'm sure he's probably seen it by now. Those are the little things. Other than that, I just think that it's a confidence thing. Now, he comes across as this stoic guy that, nothing flusters him. He's ready for anything. And I don't think that's the case. I think that there is an issue of disconnect. And the other thing is this. I think the team plays better in front of Husso.
I agree.
I mean, I think, and maybe the fact that when playing in front of Binnington, he was like, you guys go ahead, I got it back here. With the Blues, they play a different style of hockey in front of Husso. And maybe that's something they may have to go back to doing with Binnington as well.
Well, that's fascinating too, Claves, because Binnington, let's remember what he was used to when he was at his best. Jay Bouwmeester, Alex Pietrangelo, Colton Parayko, guys who were big, guys who had long reach, and guys who did not allow time in front of the net to the opposition.
Yeah.
That's not how this team plays anymore. This team plays quick puck-moving decisions out of their zone. They're going to skate it with the puck on their stick rather than make that outlet pass, Torrey Krug, Justin Falk. And I just wonder if Binnington's trying to adjust to this new identity of a Blues team rather than what he was used to, where he knew Bouwmeester was going to cover that side of the ice. He knew Parayko was covering the other. I just got to make sure I watch the guy with the stick, and I think that's a little different now. But I do feel that the team is more confident in front of Ville Husso, which results in better play defensively, which is what Jake Allen went through. It felt like the team struggled confidence-wise with Jake Allen in between the pipes, but when Binnington stepped in there, it's like, okay, well, we know he's going to make those saves so we can play our own game. And I think that's kind of where things are at right now. That's why I'm interested to see, do they go to Binnington on Thursday against the Devils, or do they continue to ride the hot hand and then let Binnington earn that confidence back with the head coach?
I kind of think they started off with Binnington because I think if you send Husso out there, it may send the wrong message that you're switching from Binnington. And as you mentioned, you don't have a lot of back-to-back nights in February.
Right.
So I think I go with Binnington because I don't want to lose him because I've made an investment in him. And I'm going to give him the opportunity to continue to be the number one guy. All right, moving along. If you're a Blues fan, there are certain dates on the calendar you always pay attention to. July 1st, the first day of free agency, and certainly the trade deadline, trade deadline day. And I don't think this is any different this year. I'm sure Blues fans, and it's always a couple of players. We always either need another goal scorer, a stay-at-home defenseman, or somebody for the power play.
Or a goaltender.
Yeah. And so this year, if I give you the shopping list, how are you going to fill that list and what are your priorities? And I'll also ask you about this. As you look and covet certain individuals to help your hockey club, you got to make sure the salaries match up. Because the Blues are already up against the cap. So I'm going to ask you to take the grocery list and let's see what you want to come up with as far as needs and how you can afford to get them.
Well, this is bad. I suck at grocery shopping, Claves. I always come home with, I forgot the milk when I went grocery shopping. But, let's start with the salary, because that's what I don't think people are taking into consideration. Everyone wants a Jacob Chikrin. Everyone wants a Mark Giordano. And yeah, you could go out there and you could take another team and say, hey, we need you to eat, 3/4 of this salary so that we can make it work. And maybe teams will do it. But if you look around on Cap Friendly, there's maybe 10 teams that have $5 million or more in cap space that can take on salary. And there's, I think, 2 of those 10 that are in the playoffs right now in Nashville and the Rangers. So when you're making a trade like this, you're probably going to have to move somebody off of your NHL ready roster, which you have to take into consideration. Are we going to disrupt the chemistry that this team has right now? And if you are, you've got to hope that they can find it in a matter of 3-4 weeks before the playoffs start.
See, I think the Blues are in a tough spot because they have a a lot of guys that make a lot of money cap wise, and then they have a lot of guys who don't make any money cap wise. So to move some of those younger assets really doesn't help you. So you're talking about plucking a guy that you're paying a lot of money to, and that's going to be a little bit more of a challenge, I think. If you can get a team, as you mentioned, to eat some of the salary, you throw in an extra draft choice or some sort of compensation that doesn't make you accountable right now, that might be the route to go. But overall, I just think it's going to be a tough task if you, as you touch on, not disrupting the chemistry on this hockey club.
Well, it claims everyone, fans see it and they say, oh, well, we'll just trade Marco Scandella and that opens up money. But you're thinking, well, is another team going to want Marco Scandella because they got 3 more years at his cap hit? So, but in terms of the defensemen that are out there, that's the number one list. That's the only thing on my grocery list. My wife sent me out to get milk. I'm getting milk and I'm coming home.
You're coming back with a defenseman.
Exactly. Okay. That's what I'm doing. See, I told you I suck at grocery shopping, players. But it's a guy who could play with Colton Parayko on the left side. That is what takes this team from they could win the Stanley Cup to they could win the Stanley Cup. There's a lot of guys out there. Ben Sherratt is the one that's been tied to the Blues. I just don't know if he's the right fit because he's struggling in Montreal. Yeah, he played with Winnipeg, but that was like 4 years ago. I'm not sure if he matches that top potential for you. Jacob Chikrin's name pops up. I love the idea of Jacob Chikrin, but it's going to probably cost you all of your assets in the minors, and I don't know if you want to jeopardize that.
And Bill Armstrong knows your minor league system better than some people in the organization.
Exactly. And I mean, do you really want to give up a Jake Neighbors, a Scott Perunovich, and a Zachary Bolduc on top of a first-round pick to get Jacob Chikrin? Great, but I don't know if he's the guy. There's 2 that I've honed in on, Claves, that I feel like would match this team's identity really well and take them to the next level. One is Zdeno Chara with the Islanders.
Stop right there. That's my guy.
He's 44 years old, and I understand what people say. He's old. He's washed up. He's 6'9", and he knows how to play on a Stanley Cup championship team. And if you look at his underlying numbers, he's actually not as bad as you would think on a really bad Islanders team. So he's the one that I like, and it's only $750,000. He's probably going to retire after this year. If he's interested, I'm calling him. But I got an interesting one, Claves, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. And I've been tooting this horn for the last week. Ryan Graves from the New Jersey Devils. Played with Colorado the last 3 years. So he's very familiar with the Central Division. If you remember him, he was a pain in the butt to play against with Colorado. He's 6'5", and he's fast. He plays with speed, and he's under control for 1 more year. New Jersey's out of it. New Jersey's probably still in this transition period. I might call the Devils and find out what they would want for a Ryan Graves, because I think he would match what they'd need to play with Colton Parayko.
So to take it one step further, as far as compensation is concerned, do the Blues have any draft choices from another team that's worse than they are? Because that's the thing I'd put on the hook to create a bait for New Jersey to have an interest, because they're going to say, well, the Blues, you guys are going to finish so far back as far as draft choices are concerned, it doesn't really help us. But if you are holding on to somebody else's draft pick, maybe it's a 2nd or 3rd or 4th round, somewhere from a deal from last year, the year before, maybe that's what you put on the hook and say, well, we'll throw this in as well. So are the Blues in that situation where they're holding an extra draft choice from someone else?
I think the most that they're holding is from Ottawa, and it's a 3rd-round pick when they made that deal for Logan Brown with Zach Sanford. But I think it's a conditional 3rd-round pick to where it transitions into a 4th-round pick, if I'm not mistaken. So they don't have that leverage, which that's why I don't know if they're going to be able to compete with the teams to get Ben Sherratt or Jacob Chikrin, because everyone wants those guys. Those are the guys that you're going to have to give up everything for.
So what you do, though, in that case, that's the piece I'm looking for, because the Ottawa 4th-round pick, worst case scenario, is going to be better than the Blues' 4th-round pick.
Right.
So you do that, you throw in an extra pick, and maybe you can get a guy like Graves. Maybe you can get a guy like Chara, and then just move on from there. One is a rental. One is a guy that you can plug in and see where he fits a year from now or 2 years from now. So I think that's where I'm probably headed. So I'm going to use that extra draft choice instead of giving up a prospect. And maybe I do have to give up a prospect, but it's not going to be a guy that's going to be stepping into my ice next year.
Well, and there's a guy that I think would be interesting in terms of the prospect side of things. And you know, Curbs made a great point. Chris Kerber on our broadcast a couple of weeks ago made a great point. You know, you have to decipher when you know you want to go all in. And if you go look back when the Dallas Stars traded Jerome McGinley, who was the 11th overall draft pick,
I
they got
remember
Joe
it well.
Nieuwendyk.
Yeah.
And Joe Nieuwendyk helped them win the Stanley Cup. Are the Blues at that point now? To me, I feel like Jake Neighbors is untouchable because I feel like he's a Craig Berube type of guy, plays the system, and you're going to need some cost-controlled players at the forward position. But they just drafted a kid named Zachary Bolduc, who was drafted 17th overall, playing really well in juniors. But to me, this is like the Tage Thompson conversation, Claves. You don't know what he's going to turn into. Maybe he turns into a Jaden Schwartz, Vladimir Tarasenko. Or maybe he turns into a Tage Thompson and he doesn't have much of an effect on the Blues team. That would be an asset that I'd be saying, okay, well, if I'm going to call New Jersey and say, hey, we want Ryan Graves, and they're like, why would we give this guy up? Well, you're not winning anytime soon. This is a former 17th overall draft pick. That would be, I think, an opportunity to set you above the rest in terms of assets that you can trade away to get what you want.
I agree with you. I think we're on the same page on that front. We'll come back and wrap up things with Alex Ferrario after we hear from this.
St. Louis Acura was the #1 Acura dealer in Missouri in 2021, and we were the 17th in the nation for Acura sales volume. We sell over 100 pre-owned vehicles monthly, and we service all of the makes and models that we sell. We are waiting for verification of our 30th Acura Precision Team Award, the only dealer in the nation with so many awards for customer satisfaction and dealership performance. We have 300 pre-owned vehicles in stock right now. St. Louis Acura, better than ever for you.
All right, wrapping up things with Alex Ferrario and the Ferrario Faceoff. All right, a couple other items I want to run by you. What else are you hearing around the league as far as trade movement? I mean, you touched on something earlier. A lot of teams are at the cap, so we're kind of looking to move contracts compared to personnel. What other teams do you think are desperately looking to fill a piece that can really get them closer to being what I would deem a legitimate cup contender?
I think there's 4 teams that I'm at least hearing that are going to be very aggressive come March 21st. 2 of them are in the East, 2 of them are in the West. The 2 in the East are the Carolina Hurricanes, who under Rod Brindamore have a really good team. They've been connected to John Klingberg from the Dallas Stars. And let me tell you, man, if they can find a way to get that done, that's a very dangerous team. And the other is the Florida Panthers. Florida's been tied to Jacob Chikrin from the Arizona Coyotes. And Florida, in my opinion, has the best 6 defensemen right now in the National Hockey League.
I would agree. Yeah.
And if they go get a Jacob Chikrin, watch out because that team is stacked right now.
I watched them recently, and I'm trying to figure out where they had a hole, and they don't. Yeah. And this is with a coach who at the beginning of the year wasn't the head coach. So they've been able to keep a very steady ship afloat, and they could cause problems. And the only other team I think that would give them a problem is Tampa, which is right across the state. Yep. What does that say about the National Hockey League, where 2 of your best teams are in the state of Florida? You talk about growth and impact this game is having. It really says a lot about what the league is all about these days.
And you look at the fan base too for Tampa, Claves. I mean, I know they didn't have a stadium for the Stanley Cup last year, and then of course in the bubble, a full stadium. But I mean, the fan base in terms of being a part of the Tampa Bay Lightning right now, it's better than what it was when they won it with Marty St. Louis and Vincent Lecavalier. I mean, that said something.
That's a fickle market. I mean, you know, you look at the baseball team that's now a perennial contender, and they still don't get the support. The Buccaneers obviously were dead in the water before Tom Brady got there. And now you have a 2-time Stanley Cup champion, and people are like, okay, all right, we'll buy in. It's a very fickle market for sure. Yeah. All right. What about the Western Conference? What about the Western Conference?
There's two teams in the West, Claves, and both are in the Central. And this is what I love, because the Pacific, Vegas can't do anything because their acquisition was Jack Eichel, who's going to be returning, and they don't have cap space. Anaheim and LA aren't really sure who they are. In Calgary's up against the cap, and I'm not sure if they're going to make a move. But Nashville and Colorado are the 2 teams that I've heard are going to be very active come trade deadline time. Colorado was tied to Zdeno Chara, which to me is like, oof, boy, the Blues need to get him before Colorado does.
I agree.
Yeah. That's dangerous to have in a first-round matchup. But then Nashville's been tied to Claude Giroux from the Philadelphia Flyers. They've been tied to a couple of other forwards. And what's really interesting about Nashville is they have a goaltender who's playing like Binnington was when they won the Cup. You say Saros is the best goalie right now in the league. their defense, you got Roman Josi, you have Matthias Ekholm, a couple of younger guys. They're winning games with a couple of stars on the forward side and then a bunch of guys that you're not sure who they are. If they go out there and add another weapon on the forward position, Nashville's going to be a tough team to handle.
And Nashville was a team I thought was going to move back in the pack this year. When they first started, they got off to a dreadful start.
Yeah.
And I really didn't count them in this year. But I don't know what happened. I think maybe Soros being a hot goalie kind of inspired some guys. But you're right about the fact that their identity after their second line is really a mystery right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the question would be, do they wake up and say, we are who we are? Or do they wake up and say, yeah, we're good as you thought we were?
Yeah, well, and especially because David Poyle, their GM, at the beginning of the season called it a competitive rebuild. And we're thinking, well, this is over. They traded away Ryan Ellis. They moved a couple of pieces on the forward side. But for me, I feel like Nashville's the kind of team that just says, I'm a little surprised by this because Philip Forsberg's an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year, and they don't know if they can keep him. And on top of it, you're getting career years from Ryan Johansson and Matt Duchene, two guys that people were clamoring to trade away from Nashville. So they're a team to me that feels like they kind of have the magic, but they're going to get into a first-round matchup and then fall apart. But if they get into a second or third position and the Blues are forced into a wild card spot, that will be really interesting because Nashville, Minnesota would go head-to-head, and then the Blues would either get Colorado or Vegas in the first round.
I'm not worried about that anymore because here's my philosophy on matchups. In order to win the cup, you're going to have to beat a good team sometime, someplace, somewhere. So you might as well get it over with and do it early.
Yep.
And I think the Blues have what it takes when it comes to that. All right, Alex, this has been a blast as always. Anything else we need to pass on before we get out of here? Because the league is really talking right now. A lot of things going on. We've weathered the storm of the Olympics. Thank goodness for that.
Yes.
And now we're going to get down to playing some hockey. Everybody's rested. A lot of teams have gone through COVID already. So this run down the stretch should be exciting.
Yeah, this is the best time of hockey years, in my opinion, Claves. Like this is the stretch run. This is where the playoff hockey truly begins. And what I'm loving about these last 38 games for the Blues and for the other NHL teams is, unless you're going into Canada, you don't have to get tested. Once you're back in, you're back in. So hopefully we don't have to go through a lot of guys going in and out of the lineup, and you just have normal hockey moving forward to the playoffs.
I hope they remember how that works. It's been
probably
a while.
Not. It's been 3 years. I don't know how that works.
All right, Alex. As always, man, it's good to visit with you. He's Alex Ferrario. It's the Ferrario Faceoff. It's on ClavesOnline.com.
The only thing faster than this supersonic golf cart are the closing times at thehomeloanexpert.com. Mortgage rates on the twos, and we have a 21-day closing guarantee. Apply online today at thehomeloanexpert.com.